community, learning, discussion, respect, integrity, truth, science, and discovery. Welcome to my Paranormal Soapbox. Hello, and welcome to my Paranormal Soapbox. I'm your friendly neighborhood ghost hunter, Justin Brown, and tonight we will be talking about near-death experiences by popular demand. It's going to be interesting. It's a very interesting topic, something that's been researched. A lot of anecdotal evidence has been gathered about the subject of near-death experiences. A lot of interesting things have been reported by doctors, and nurses, and care practitioners. It's interesting. I even had, my mom's sister even had one when she was hit by a car at a high rate of speed and reported having one. So we're going to talk about them and how it relates to life after death, the paranormal, and it's going to be interesting. So, Missy, are you ready to talk about?
Yes.
Okay, good. Derek's going to be helping us tonight on YouTube, but he had to go pick up Casey, so he will be on shortly. If you're new to this show and you would like to interact, give your opinions, or ask me questions, please do so in the comments, but be patient. We're going to refer back to the comments, and Missy and Derek will read them off to me, and we'll answer them, and we'll shout out some people. So if you want to be shouted out on the show, just comment, and we will shout you out. All right. So, near-death experiences. This has been a topic of interest for me for a long time because, of course, everybody wonders if there's a life after death. And I used to watch a show called Unsolved Mysteries in the late 80s and early 90s, and there was often a show on near-death experiences on that show. And I started watching other documentaries and shows on it. And it's natural to be curious about what happens after you pass on. So the question is it real? Is it something that you're actually seeing and remembering? Or is it a hallucination or a dream? And that's a very good question. And the scientific community and the medical community has asked this question. And what they did in the 70s and even later, they want to know if the experiences reported by people all over the world has some type of cultural implication. Are they seeing their deities that they believe in? Are they are seeing a reenactment of what their faith or religion says happens when you pass on? So that's an important factor to consider. We're going to read some articles here. I got two articles that I'm going to reference during this show. I'm not an expert on any NDEs, so I'm going to reference this article. It says, studying socio-cultural factors and their potential influence on the mental processes reported during cardiac arrest when near-death experiences may occur. In other words, the fact that a person may interpret cognitive experiences during cardiac arrest differently, depending on his religious background, education, and upbringing, is very important. This is because if all these experiences only reflected people's preconceived ideas, then it would support the notion that a NDE is simply based upon an individual's own background, rather than being a universal phenomenon that transcends cultural and religious views, and it would have little scientific interest. Now, the central features of an NDE have been recorded throughout history and across numerous cultures and religious groups. Reports of an NDE have also been described by atheists as well as those with particular faith, whether it be as practicing members or non-practicing members of a particular religion. Some studies have been carried out with an aim of studying near-death experiences in non-Western cultures. Historically, events closely resembling a near-death experience have been described by Bolivian, Argentine, and North American Indians, and also in Buddhist texts, Islamic texts, and accounts from China, Siberia, and Finland. The most common features are having an out-of-body experience, a reunion with ancestors and departed friends, an experience of light accompanied by joy and peace, a border of or dividing line between the living and the dead. And another one that's not mentioned here that I will throw out there is a lot of people report before they pass life flashing before their eyes. And there's actually another thing that I want to get into after I go through all this. It's not exactly an NDE, but it's called a bedside phenomenon before the person actually passes away, that they see deceased loved ones, even angels, and so on. Studies on influence of socioculture factors on near-death experiences and deathbed visions. In one study carried out in 1985, the experiences of 16 Asian Indians had been compared with those of Americans, and it had been found that the Indians had often encountered Yamaraj, the Hindu king of the dead, while the Americans had not. So this is in bedside experiences, like I said. The largest cross-cultural study had been carried out in 1977 by Osis and Haraldson, and had focused more on deathbed visions. These are the experiences that people have been or have before death, usually the 24 hours prior to death, and they are different from the classic NDE phenomena. Deathbed visions are usually reported by carers who have looked after a person during the dying process. In the study, the researchers had examined the visions of approximately 440 terminal ill American and Indian patients as described to their doctors and nurses. The most common feature, which occurred in 91% of cases, was seeing deceased relatives. In 140 cases, there were reports of seeing religious figures, usually described as an angel or god. Where these were specifically identified, they were always described according to the person's religious beliefs. No Hindu reported seeing Jesus, and no Christian a Hindu deity. So these definitely seem to be influenced by religious and cultural conditioning. In a more recent study, since sociocultural differences are thought to be potentially account for variations observed in the near-death experience phenomena, the authors analyzed whether social or societal beliefs influenced NDEs. Since the prevailing Western model of an NDE was defined by Moody's description of the phenomena in 1975, in order to explore the influence of this culture model, the authors compared 24 near-death experience phenomena accounts collected before 1975 and 24 after 1975. So to sum this all up, what this article says is that no matter what their cultural upbringing was, what their religious belief was, there was no indication or evidence that suggested that their culture or religious ideology or belief affected what they reported. They specifically went out and talked to Indians, natives, people in China, people all over the world. Conclusions consider the studies we have just described, although it does seem that the central features of near-death experiences have been recorded throughout history and across numerous cultures. The actual interpretation of what people claim to have observed of the experience they claim to have lived through may reflect personal religions or cultural views. So in other words, if you see a being of light, they report seeing a being of light, but they'll interpret it according to their religious belief. If they say they see a being of light, they may say, I seen an angel, I seen God. Or in other, religious beliefs, they'll report seeing their deities. But that's what they believe. They don't really actually know what it is. So it's important to understand that the language that they use and the concepts they use to articulate what they're reporting will bleed in to what they're reporting. So that's what this article basically states. Now, what's also interesting, excuse me, before we move on, is the recent studies about the brain being active after clinical death occurs. And what ends up happening is they found out that the brain still has activity after their heart stops. They quit breathing. A lot of medical doctors, nurses, caregivers, they will report the patient after they're clinically dead, seeing who's there, hearing what they say, remembering what happens when they're not supposed to. Some of them report floating above the bed, moving through the halls, and then coming back. That's interesting because we don't understand NDEs. Is it a spiritual experience, or is it still the brain processing information after clinical death? We don't understand what happens to the conscious state after clinical death. So more research is needed. My whole life I've been trying to stay away from what the Bible says happens, or what a pastor says happens, or what a specific dogma or religion says happens. Anecdotal evidence is cool because you get to collect all this data and then cross-reference it with everything. What's the trends that are happening across many cultures, ages? Even 2-year-olds report floating about their bodies, seeing a light at the end of a tunnel, so on and so forth. So it's not like we're teaching these things to people. They're seeing it whether they have been taught it or not. So very, very interesting stuff. Real quick before we go to the chat, well, I don't know how time. Let's go to Missy and see if we can do some shout outs on Facebook real quick.
Okay, I have Jessica Bias, I have Christy Brown, I have Heather Elliott, I have Matt Benton, I have Bill Davis, I have El Salvador. Yeah, he knows I don't know how to pronounce his name. I have Kathy Gastow. I don't know how to say her last name. I'm sorry. And Buster Williams.
All right,
and Shannon Morrison.
All right. Nice to see you guys back on. What's going on, guys? Any questions so far on Facebook?
No questions yet.
Okay, I'm going to go back here. Make sure there's no questions on YouTube real quick. Derek's not back yet, right?
He just jumped on.
Oh, did he?
Yep.
All right, Derek. Yes. If you're ready to rock, brother, you can do the shout outs on YouTube, and I'm going to try to, while you're doing that, I'm going to try to see if there's any questions, unless you already know.
Cool. I'm not sure if there's any questions. I haven't really looked.
Okay, I'll look.
We've got Raw Uncut Paranormal on, Craig Williams. Let me scroll up here. Sam's Wings. Make sure I don't miss anybody. Glenda Holding. Jessica jumped on for a few. Scotty Fox is on. And Val W is on. And I'm thinking Truth Paranormal joined. General Rogue is on. And I do believe that is, Edward Kinsey just popped on. And I do see they have a question, but it's at the very end. Did you see anything before the very end?
No, he's the first question that I see.
Okay. My question is, how do some people know when they're about to die?
That's an interesting question.
I do find that interesting that he brought that up, because believe it or not, I was thinking about this on the way home when you were telling the thing about people experiencing things before death and how they see things, hear things, and it's weird because when my mom died, we found out after the fact that she had written down multiple Bible verses. She had actually marked pages in the Bible and wrote down specific passages in the Bible. When we went back and read them, they all correlated with death, being ready for death, accepting death. I mean, all this stuff. And then my aunt told us that months before she had her stroke and died, that she had actually called her and told her that she spoke to someone and was ready to go. She had accepted everything that was coming her way. And it's like, this is months before anything happened.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I would think that's maybe a lot of people would know that they're dying, but not everyone, of course. So the question is, for the people who knew they were dying, what were the signs? And I can only imagine that aside from doctors saying you're dying and your relatives saying that you're dying, or just someone just flat out telling you, hey, you're dying, you have X amount to live, there's got to be some type of intuition or a gut feeling that you are living out your last days, hours, minutes, who knows. The most interesting signs that we're going to talk about on the show is the bedside experiences, seeing dead relatives, seeing past friends, seeing people who are no longer living, and seeing angelic or spiritual beings. There's a lot of implications that these are culturally influenced, but we cannot discount them as something like a hallucination. I believe that it's possible that you can see things. You know, does the veil get thinner, as they say, when you approach death? It's possible, but I don't know. Based on the anecdotal reports and evidence, it could be possible. But the only thing that we can be sure of is what we get and what we enter in the data. And it seems, you know, based on the article I read, that the bedside experiences seem to be more culturally influenced. So hopefully that answers the question. Anything else? Any other questions on Facebook or YouTube before I continue?
Well, Matt asked a question about a comment that he made. He asked what you thought about his comments. So
what was his comment?
It says, actually, I have heard of a Muslim seeing Jesus. When the kid died, then came back, and he reverted to Christianity. But that could just be Christian propaganda. Who knows?
That's interesting. That goes against the data in the article that I read. Most people don't see deities during NDEs. One of my most favorite near-death experience stories is what's his name? Eben Alexander. If you've never heard the story about Eben Alexander, he was a neuroscience surgeon, and he was an atheist. He was pretty much a cut and dry science guy. He didn't believe in life after death. He didn't believe that it was possible to have these NDEs. Well, he ended up having some invasive viral infection of his brain. I forget the actual name of it. Derek and Missy might help me remember it, but he was pretty much put in a coma, and based on this viral infection of his brain, he should have had no cognitive activity whatsoever. But he tells a very fascinating story of how he went from this very dark, earthworm-like consciousness, as he stated, to this very vivid, colorful, flying on the back, this little microbe flying on the back of a butterfly experience where he felt extreme joy, peace, serenity. There was this very beautiful woman there telling him that you're loved, that you can do nothing wrong, but he didn't know who it was. And what's fascinating is when he came out of the coma and he's trying to figure out why he had these experiences, he found out that his foster or his sister that he never met because he was an orphan, that she had died, and when he saw a picture of her for the first time after this experience, it was her in his near-death experience. Very cool story. What makes it cool is it was a neurosurgeon who doesn't believe in this stuff, has a near-death experience. So if you don't believe in it, why should you have an experience if it's from the mind, believing in that? You're creating these things. definitely check that out. It's all over YouTube. He's got a book. But that's the kinds of stories I'm looking at, because it's definitely interesting. I seen a comment up here that I wanted to make sure I read. Go ahead and read Shannon Morrison's comment about the agonal breathing patterns. I think that's how you pronounce that.
It's agonal.
Agonal.
Agonal breathing patterns almost always indicate death is imminent. Maybe people pick up other psychological changes we don't know to measure.
Okay, I just wanted to have that read. Yeah, there's a couple other things. Hospice, when my grandmother passed away, there's like this dropping of the jaw, thing. There's a sign. But I don't know if when you're living, if you pick up on the breathing pattern thing.
Oh, you hear it.
So you've been dead and felt yourself? Okay.
My uncle, when he died, you could hear it.
I was referring back to the person's question about how do you know when you're about to die.
Oh yeah, you can hear I'm sure he could hear it because he was still, functioning at that point.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's what's hard to understand is when you have a near-death experience, it's usually something that changes you. It's not only profound to be on death's door, but you're having an experience when you think that you're dead. So that kind of profound experience, when you have it, can alter everything that you believe and alter what kind of person you are. It's almost like a reset of the ego. It can totally change everything for a person. And it can make you become more spiritual if you weren't spiritual before. And I think that's significant, because a lot of people struggle with their own spirituality. They struggle whether they believe in God or not. A lot of people have a hard time believing in such things because there's a lot of cruel things in the world, obviously. So they believe that if there is a God out there, why would he allow such things to occur? Well, to answer that real quick is, most deities give free will. In order to have free will, shit has to happen. And you can look at the duality of existence. In order to have love, you got to have hate. And, you got to have a dual existence of everything so you can have something to compare to the other, to have some type of information at the end of it. So, the near-death experiences are something we definitely need to look into if we're going to understand anything about life after death research. The longest I've seen is probably like some severe cases. Somebody's drowned in cold water and been dead for a long, long time. Okay, Google, what's the longest case of being dead and brought back to life? I'm very curious about this. Okay, woman comes back to life after being dead for 17 hours. Whoa. It's a long time. We'll read this. Woman comes back to life after being dead for 17 hours. A 59-year-old American woman who was presumed dead after her heart stopped and was taken off life support came back to life, stunning her doctors and family. After Velma Thomas from Nitro, West Virginia, went into cardiac arrest at home, medics managed to establish a faint pulse after 8 minutes of CPR, but at the hospital her heart stopped twice more. She was placed on life support. For more than 17 hours, doctors failed to detect any brain activity despite extensive attempts to revive her, including pioneering treatment to lower her body's temperature and a bid to stimulate the brain. Family members braced themselves for the worst. Tim Thomas, Velma's son, said that he and 24 relatives and friends gathered at the hospital and prayed before starting to accept her death. I came to the conclusion that she wasn't going to make it. Doctors told him there was no pulse, blood pressure, or measurable brain activity. There were really no signs of the neurological functions. But as they began making funeral arrangements, Mr. Thomas was contacted by the hospital and told that soon after being taken off life support, his mother came back to life. Mrs. Thomas had begun moving her limbs when suddenly her heart restarted, a nurse said. Whoa. By that time, Mr. Thomas got back to the hospital. She had already asked, where's my son? He told the Charleston Daily Mail. In shock, Dr. Eagleson told the paper the chances of surviving 3 such long periods without a heart rate were less than 10%. It's a miracle. So 17 hours. The body can come back. I wonder if she did have a near-death experience. I know a lot of people who have comas, including Missy, reported remembering nothing. Some people, do not have a near-death experience if they're, suffering from cardiac arrest or on death's door, but some people do. And I think the reason for that is when you're in that state of consciousness, if you have a state of consciousness at all, it's hard to remember because it's almost dreamlike. Excuse me, I'm kind of under the weather. We don't always remember our dreams. Sometimes it's right there and then it'll quickly leave us. And the reason that is because we're in a completely different conscious state. And we may be having these experiences, but we just don't remember them come back. Go ahead and read Bill Davis's comment there, Jess. Or Missy.
Chieflins?
Yes.
My brother had a heart attack, and they put him in that cryo stuff and cooled him down, and he came back in good shape. Don't think he experienced anything.
Yeah, it's. Oh, I didn't turn on my phone. It's interesting to know, if you can know, if people do experience things but don't remember them. Right?
Right. Christy had a question that me and you have discussed in length before.
Okay.
Her question was, Justin, do you think the ones who had near-death experiences are the ones who can see and talk to spirits without any devices?
I can't say no. Can't say yes. It could be because memory isn't perfect. It could be because some people just don't see those things and other people do. I do believe that it's possible in your dreams you can have spiritual experiences easily, or more easy than you could awake, because of the altered conscious state. So, with that being said, that would make it possible for someone in the near-death state to see things more easily. I'm not going to pretend like I know for sure. I think... I just think that people who do have abilities should have it easier when they're dying. I think it's definitely possible. I'll just say that.
Okay.
I wish I knew. Are we clear on Facebook?
Yeah, I have a few comments, but Becky Compton said, I had an experience when I had a very bad accident, medically induced coma for 3 weeks.
Yeah, she does.
But I was given a different way to look at what happened, and I don't know what it was.
Yeah, she wrote me a message explaining that during her coma, her grandmother, who she believed was her grandmother, was singing beside her bed, comforting her. And when she reported this to her family, she said there was no one there, and that she shouldn't have any memory of her being in the hospital in the coma. And she never understood that. And those are, kind of correlates with the bedside phenomena that people report. Anything on YouTube?
Okay. Yeah. I have first question is, let me find it again. Val said, "Do you think the pineal gland has anything to do with these experiences?"
It's hypothesized and speculated, yes, because when they did the studies on a rat's pineal gland, they found DMT release or evidence of the DMT molecule. And DMT is supposed to be the spirit molecule where it gives you this spiritual, psychedelic, if you will, experience. And since it's a natural occurring molecule in the brain and we have receptors for it, it would make sense that there is some type of reason to why that's there. Whether it's released during death, I don't think is proven, but it definitely could be the reason why we're having these experiences. I wish that there was some type of way to study DMT release during death.
And then Craig Williams said, "Is the Grim Reaper real or just made up?"
Well, all the NDE research I've done, it's not common to see a Grim Reaper entity, but it has been reported that it's just not common.
Well, let's see. I had something else here. Okay. Do you know if there's any truth to the guy that claims he can talk to dead people and you can go to him and he can talk to one of your dead relatives?
Yeah.
What guy?
I'm not sure. Edward Kinsey is the one who wrote it, and that was pretty much exactly how he wrote it.
Okay.
Now, Scotty Fox brings up a good point. He said, "If I see Steve Huff on my deathbed, then I know I'm going to hell."
That's funny.
There's a lot of just kind of conversation. They got in a big conversation about agonal breathing and the death rattle.
I see Scotty Fox question, so let me first address Craig's. Is it possible for a man to see, dead relatives? I believe it's possible, but the accuracy of information that they are able to give is questionable. I've not met anybody who can give 100% accurate information about someone who has passed when questioned. Like if they're being tested, like if you're asking them a bunch of questions. Of course, I have seen people and read about people who can give completely accurate information about those who have passed, but only certain details, not every detail. Go ahead and read Scott's question because that's interesting.
The
weight loss upon death.
Okay, let me find it here.
I can read it if you need me to.
Yeah, because I don't see it unless I just overlooked it.
Okay, Scotty Fox asks, what does Justin think about the 25-gram loss in weight at the moment of death? There was a gentleman. Go ahead and mute, Derek. There was a gentleman. I forget his name. I'm terrible with remember names, but it was like 1907. There was this guy who did experiments where there was people dying of tuberculosis, I believe, and he had them agree to lay on this bed with scales to measure their weight. So when they would die, be clinically pronounced dead, he would weigh them before and then after they were pronounced dead. And in a few cases, he's seen them lose around 25 grams. And a lot of people were skeptical about that. They said that there was flaws. Not everybody lost the 25 grams. Some people have theories on why they lost the weight. But another book brought that back up. It was called Ghost Physics, I think. I was by J.C. Knight, which is his book name, not his real name. I was trying to have him on my show, but he ended up canceling. And he thought that the the orchestrated reduction in the microtubules, the quantum states of microtubules, might be what could account for the missing weight. And when I researched this is interesting. If you weighed the average, like if the average weight of a human body is 180 pounds, and if you weighed all the electrons in their body, it would equal 21 grams. And that was the 21 grams is what was reported by this guy who did the experiments in the early 20th century. So, is there some type of electron differential between living and dead? I don't think so. But if there could be something electrical or quantum happening, but there just needs to be more research. So it's a cool idea to think about, but before I jump to any conclusions, there just needs to be more research on that. All right, are we clear on YouTube and Facebook for now?
Yeah, I've got nothing left on YouTube.
Okay.
They're just commenting back and forth. Now I kind of have I guess it's more of a theory rather than a question. What is the possibility that since out of body experiences at the point of death or the moment before death are so rare, what is the possibility that an outer body experience is nothing less than your soul leaving your body as you die, and instead of reincarnation happening, your next body that you're supposed to get doesn't come along for reincarnation to happen. Therefore, the higher power puts you back into the original body to wait for your next one.
Access denied.
Right.
I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, that's just kind of a different spin to put on it.
I don't believe that there's a god or a deity that controls those things.
That's interesting.
If I told people what I believe, they probably would they'd have a hard time relating it to what they believe.
True.
And if everybody in the comments want me to tell you what I believe, spiritually, what God is and everything, just ask me in the comments, and before the show ends, I'll kind of give you my take on it. But that's actually interesting, Derek. I'll give you that.
I thought it was. It just kind of popped in my head. I was like, hey, this is neat.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, are we clear on Facebook?
Yeah, I got nothing. They're just talking back and forth.
All right, awesome. Yeah, if you guys want me to speculate on what I think is going on up there in the clouds on the other side, I will. But it is interesting about the outer body experience. I definitely want you guys to look up. God, I'm so terrible with names. Let me look this up and jog my memory. I think I'm getting sick. O-R. Okay, there we go. Stuart Hameroff and Robert Penrose, I think, is the physicist that he wrote a book with. There's this thing called orchestrated objective reduction. I want you guys to look this up. I'll spell it out on YouTube for you guys. It's orchestrated objective reduction. And I'll put it on Facebook too. There's this anesthesiologist that was really curious about consciousness, and he wanted to understand more about consciousness and memory. So he believes that, certain mechanics in the microtubules in the brain cells are in a quantum state. And since they are in a quantum state, it would give rise or imply certain things that quantum states have, like non-locality, superposition being the non-locality of quantum entanglement, meaning that the state of one electron or one particle determines the state of another. And those things are interesting. So here, let me go on Facebook and type this in. Just give me one moment. Find my live stream. There it is. I want you guys to look into this because it's really, really interesting. It's called Orchestrated Objective Reduction. And there's, it's proposed by physicists, scientists, clinical practitioners. I'd like to hear it. Okay. Here we go. Buckle in, guys. I believe that the human brain needs to personify a higher power. The reason they need to personify such a thing is that that's the way the brain works. It tries to find patterns and relate things to themselves in order to understand them. So they create gods and deities. I don't believe gods and deities exist. What I do see and believe in are patterns in nature. The patterns I believe in nature are divine is this. If you look at a human cell, it's alive. If you look at a paramecium, a one-celled organism, it's alive. It's covered by these microtubules. They don't have brains, but they are alive. They respond to stimuli. They reproduce with other parameciums. They're alive. They have their own conscious states. But small things like cells can link together and make multicellular organisms. We are multicellular organisms, so we are higher powers that consist of other conscious states. And, it's all together and orchestrated together to become one being. But in fact, I believe, and it's true, that I am part, inside me are millions of beings with their own conscious states. So that pattern makes me believe that the universe, the bigger picture, is an organism. We are part of an organism or a being like that. That is a pattern. So this higher power is not controlling our fate the way we think. Now, it is controlling our fate, but this is how. The fate of my liver cell is directly dependent on how I treat it. It's not the other way around. A lot of people believe that we have to appease God in order to have everlasting salvation and have an enjoyable afterlife. For my liver cell to have an enjoyable life, I have to take care of it. I have to do things for it. So I believe it's the other way around. I think there's other things out there determining our fate and have a direct impact on whether we have good lives or not, or if we have a good experience or not. And that is a very interesting way to look at it. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Now, when it comes to reincarnation, all that has to do with is consciousness, okay? Excuse me. Now, can we reincarnate into other things like grass, flowers, other things that could be conscious? Well, yes, but would we have memory of them, and would that, make any sense to the human brain? No, I don't think so. All I know is I don't remember anything before I was born. So that leads me to believe that all I can know about is now. But there is a very, huge boiling gut feeling inside me that says what I'm doing means something. So there's consequences to my actions, and my life does have meaning. I give it meaning, not anybody else. When we die, it's up to us whether we can live with ourselves. That life flash before our eyes, phenomena, that self-evaluation period that some people experience before they die or before they think they're dying, is the brain and the ego saying, hey, wait a minute. Have I left some boxes unchecked? Is there things I regret? Yes, no, maybe. So the brain understands that there is a meaning to morality. There is value in doing things they believe is right or wrong. The phrase that I like to remember is there's no atheists in foxholes. A lot of people who claim that they're atheists will shout on top of their soapbox that there is no God, but if you put them in a situation where they believe they're going to die, they'll start praying to God. They'll start praying to Jesus. Whatever cultural influence they have, they'll start doing those types of things. Fear of death will cause that. And that is deeply interesting to me because no matter if you believe in a higher power, a life after death, you're already influenced by it. Your resistance to it doesn't mean that you believe in it or not. Excuse me. And that's fascinating. That is really, really fascinating. But before we end the show, what I want to understand and I want to convey to you guys is there are scientific studies done that suggest there is no cultural influence to the main trending aspects of these reports. Seeing the light, seeing the tunnel, floating through the air, those things. Make sure I'm not leaving anything out here. It's up here. There was main things here. Reunion with ancestors and departed friends. And there's a border or dividing line between the living and the dead. So they kind of see the living over here and they see the afterlife over here. Like they can see a difference. And it's really fascinating that, let me go back to my aunt. My aunt was walking across a crosswalk going to work one day. A car was speeding like 60 miles per hour through the parking lot and hit her straight on, threw her 60 yards through the air. Should have been dead. Well, she didn't die, but she reported while she was unconscious seeing a realm of white light, these beings that appear to be angelic, come to her. She's seen that there was a dividing line of this really spiritual, majestic looking stream. And that was the dividing line between death and the life and death. And she had those elements in there. And she did see departed loved ones and family. So that's interesting. Is there certain elements of brain function that cause us to have these experiences? Losing consciousness or struggling to be conscious when you're unconscious, trying to survive, is seeing the white light a side effect of that? That's something that I ask and would like to know, and I think we need to find out if we're going to understand such things. The body floating above in the near-death experiences is something really, really fascinating because I do remote viewing studies and research. In fact, we're having a remote viewer on Necromancer tomorrow, and she can give us some insight on this if you're watching tomorrow. So, the ability for people to leave their body, even when they're alive, could be the reason why people leave their body during near-death experiences. It could be some type of altered state of consciousness. All interesting things. We'll go back to comments before we wrap up the show. Any other questions or interesting comments?
No. Jamie said, when I had mine, it wasn't so much of a tunnel, but like a light enveloping me. So is that why I don't remember anything? Because mine was all in my brain?
I don't know why. Some
I don't
people
know.
don't report anything, especially
Right.
in coma. They don't report
Yeah.
anything. It's actually uncommon that people report things in comas.
Right. But the only thing I remember is coming out of the coma. I don't remember anything prior to.
I think there's factors to it. There's definitely got to be factors. So, I'll ask you, Missy, near-death experiences, do you believe that they're spiritual? Do you think they're actually perceiving life after death, or you think it's in the brain?
I don't know.
What does
I
your
think,
heart tell you, Missy?
don't start with your...
What does your gut tell you?
I would guess they were real. A lot of people have them. I mean,
You believe your encounters with spirits and entities are real, right?
oh yeah.
So why not when people are dead or dying?
Right.
All right, YouTube. Anything else?
Yeah, I've got a couple small questions, real short ones. Sam's Wing said, if the mind can make you sick, shouldn't the mind also be able to heal you as well?
Yes.
I was going to answer it, but I figured I'd ask the question because she ain't asked nothing all night.
For a
except
more
for that.
elaborate answer, yes, you need to look up the placebo effect, and then you need to look up holistic medicine and psychic healing, and just study psychology.
Yes. And Scotty Fox threw out a nice little tidbit of information for everybody to know. There are 2 to 4 pounds of bacteria in a 200-pound person. That's kind of freaky. I thought that was interesting. And then Sam did say she believes we came from someone higher than us.
What do you think? Do you believe, Derek? Do you believe in God?
I never really. I mean, my parents. My dad was Catholic. My mom, I think, was Baptist. But when we were kids, we didn't do church. They kind of got out of the religion thing. We went to church like once or twice. Then my parents were kind of at each other all the time, so we got kicked out of church. So we never went to church. When you get thrown out of church, you don't go back to church. It's pretty bad. But I wasn't brought up in a house that preached the Bible and God and all this and that kind of stuff. And I always looked at to me, a church was always a sham. It's a money scheme, almost like a pyramid scheme. When you look at it, they draw you in, they throw a bunch of stuff at you, they preach and they talk and they get you singing, and then they want your money. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you are there for them to take your money. But they make you feel and believe by doing what you're doing that you're spiritually connecting with what they consider is God. There's multiple theories out there. You've got, creationism and some other things. And there's so much, there's more evidence pointing towards, who's to say that God made the world, made the planet, just because there's a book written that says so. That whole story has been passed down from generations to generations to generations to generations. And I can't honestly say that anybody has ever seen original documentation from back when supposedly Jesus was around that taught all this stuff. Where is the original teachings proving that that's the way things happen? I think as the human mind, it has to be tricked into believing things. People like to have something to believe in. People like to have a safe space, and that is used a lot of times as a safe space for people to be in. It's a calming effect. It's just like you said earlier, when the moment of truth comes, the first thing people do is start A, praying, and B, asking for forgiveness because they think they're going to heaven. Well, at the end of the day, nobody has ever proven that there's heaven and there's hell. There are some people that solely believe that what you do every day, right now, on a day-to-day basis, is your hell. So what is heaven? When we go out and research a spirit, if there are spirits that we're communicating with, and we validate this, why are they still here? If there's a heaven and a hell, and you go to one place or the other, how in the hell are you stuck here?
Good question. Another thing you need to bring up is fear of death or coping with the death of loved ones is another reason why we're wired to believe to cope.
Right.
And
right. I mean, I was never, forced into believing in religion and stuff like that. I always thought church was like I said, was kind of a scam. We always figured if you're going to do any type of religious stuff, you could do that stuff at home and, kind of do your prayers and stuff like that and believe what you want to believe. For me, I always believed that there was possibly a higher being. I never looked at it as being, God, Jesus, and trickle down effect. I always thought that there's something out there in the whole scope of the universe that controls everything that goes on.
Right.
Now, if that boils down to an organism that is like almost like a beehive, the queen bee is the queen organism, and it kind of spawns out all the other organisms, and everything derives from it. So, is there an organism out there that we all derive from that gives everybody our what we are now, pretty much?
That's what I'm saying, and I want to see if I could throw up this image here. See if I can get a big one here. Here we go. Actually, let me see if I got display capture on. All I have is window capture, so we'll go to display capture. There it is. Left monitor? Okay, we'll do that. Okay. Alright, what you guys are seeing now is, hold on, this is way big. Let me shrink it down. Let me shrink that down. Okay. What you're seeing right here is a model of all the galaxies. It's a galaxy cluster. And the structure of if we were super huge, what it would look like to see all the clusters of galaxies. Galaxies are drawn together by gravity, and they kind of cluster together into these veins, and it's very organic looking. What it resembles is this. Neurons. Okay? This is what it resembles. So, the galaxy clusters to me look like a network of neurons. And something very, very, very small in the brain is the same way what it looks like when it's really, really, really huge. So that's kind of goes along with my theory of us being part of a larger organism. And you don't need to have much intelligence to understand that. It's kind of simplifying it down and seeing patterns in the universe, because our human brain is exceptional at identifying patterns. That would explain pareidolia, for example, and how we can identify patterns even in random stimuli. So there you go. Let that be your lasting thoughts for tonight's soapbox, guys. I'm going to wrap this up. You guys have been fantastic. The supporters of the show each and every week means a lot to me. Establishing and growing this community is something that I'm very passionate about doing. If you have any ideas, topics you want me to cover, please message me, email me at justinbrown@interfacedeath.net. Do whatever you can, and I will consider it, and we'll throw it into voting polls each week, and we'll vote on them. But this is what we do on this show: is we see what we think about all these things. I try to learn from you, and I hope that you learn from me as well. So, thanks for joining us. Before we head out of here, we're going to talk about Patreon as we normally do. This is what makes this show possible and keep going. So, if you haven't heard me preach about Patreon, it's a way to financially support our paranormal work and these live productions each and every week. Without Clay Borman, R.J. Murphy, Scotty Fox, Casey Schreiner, Jessica Bias, Bill Davis, Joe Vitale, Heather Elliott, and General Rogue, you wouldn't be sitting here with me today. So if you want to ensure that this keeps going, check out patreon.com/supportinterfacedeath. The link is in the description of the video. I'm not feeling too great, but I will see you tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Hopefully I'm feeling better. We're going to have Vanessa Hogel on the show. She is an author, artist, and remote viewer, among many things. She's been experiencing paranormal phenomena since the age of 2. Has traveled the world, working on hundreds of cases that involve the paranormal. So join us on Necromancer Live Show on Facebook and the Interface Death YouTube channel at 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. You guys have an awesome night. Thanks for joining me again. You guys are awesome. I love you. You are in my heart. Stick around for some video promotions if you have not seen them or like to see them. As always, I'll see you guys next time. Do you have that drive? That morbid curiosity to explore the darkness? Do you have what it takes to brave the night? You do? Good.
Of prolonged isolation, paranoia, depression, helplessness, brain stimuli decreases. Now what happens when you put a man isolated in 3 paranormal infested buildings for 3 nights in each location, all by himself? No one to help me. No one to protect me. Just me versus you. Does paranormal activity increase?
So what do you think of this piece of evidence?
I think by far it's the best piece of evidence we have seen here.
That's flat out amazing. And that's something we've never captured.
Oh, wow.
What?
First
Nobody
time
has ever got it on video.
That's creepy. No
In
one's-
11 years.
So no one's ever caught this on video?
Never.
Never.
Ever.
Here is my story, and here is what I went through for my research into the paranormal.
Push the door, please.
Are you in this room over here? What the fuck, dude?
Whoa.
That's weird.
You didn't do anything, right?
No, I just turned.
Justin too close.
No, I
No,
wasn't
he
there.
opened that door and then went off.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you just run out of there?